You ever wake up thinking it's going to be a normal day, maybe a cup of coffee, some calm by the water, and then realize that someone has completely crossed a line you didn't even think could be crossed? That was me, Alex Rivers, standing on my shoreline one morning, binoculars in hand, staring at the construction chaos that had appeared overnight. At first, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. A fully built private marina, complete with docks, jet skis, and even one of those luxury yachts that cost more than some houses on the block, all perched on the shoreline I legally owned, the part everyone in the neighborhood had been calling and used. I blinked a few times, adjusting the binoculars. No, it wasn't a mirage. This was real. Someone had taken my peaceful stretch of beach, the one I used for quiet mornings, my boat landing, and my occasional weekend swimming, and had turned it into their personal playground. My jaw dropped. Baxter, my golden retriever, was sniffing along the sand, tail wagging, completely unaware of the existential crisis I was having. "You see this, buddy?" I muttered. He barked once, probably agreeing, probably thinking I was overreacting. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they thought that stretch was public property. I walked up to the marina office. Yes, they actually had a little shed for the marina, and asked politely, "Excuse me, do you realize this is private property?" The response: smiles. Casual shrug. A man sipping coffee on his yacht said, "Well, the permit says it's fine." They called it an used land. And used. My land. My private shoreline. My quiet corner of the world. Over the next few hours, I tried everything the reasonable person does. Polite emails, phone calls to the HOA, even casual conversations with the neighbors. "Hi. We're, using the shoreline legally." Megan, the HOA president, said, clipboard in hand, smiling as if the problem was on my side. Each word stung. "Legally?" I asked. "On my land." She shrugged. "Technically and used." I nearly dropped my coffee. Baxter barked. I went home, pacing the living room, thinking through every angle. Weeks earlier, I had enjoyed the quiet of the shoreline, watching the sunrise over the water, throwing sticks for Baxter, occasionally kayaking down to the small sandbar. Now, this stretch had been turned into a full-blown luxury marina, loud engines, construction dust, workers walking around. It wasn't just an inconvenience, it was an affront. That night, I started compiling evidence. Maps of my property, deed records, old photos showing my use of the shoreline, and even drone footage from previous summers proving the area was private. I wanted to make sure that if I escalated this, I had everything airtight. Polite requests had failed. Subtle reminders had failed. It was time to take the legal and strategic route. I also started researching permits. Coastal permits, environmental regulations, local ordinances about shoreline development. That's when I realized there was a flaw. They had a permit, but it didn't apply to private property that was actively owned and documented. Their contractor had assumed, and used meant public, but in legal terms, my ownership was crystal clear. That's when the plan began to form in my mind. Not revenge, not exactly, but something that would stop the marina, restore my shoreline, and make a point. Every evening that week, I reviewed plans. I marked boundaries on the map, documented the exact areas the marina occupied, noted every violation of setback rules, environmental impact regulations, and public access restrictions. Baxter would sit beside me, watching me pace, occasionally nudging my leg as if he were saying, "You got this, buddy." I also rehearsed conversations with Megan and the board, making sure I could stay calm and factual when confronting them. No shouting, no threats, just precision and law on my side. Meanwhile, the marina kept growing. Docks extended, small yachts tied up, workers, painting and sanding. I walked down my own property, binoculars in hand, documenting everything carefully. Photos of dock construction, measurements, dates. Each detail counted. By the end of the week, I had every piece of evidence I needed, every legal citation, and a plan that would leave no room for dispute. That Friday morning, I stood on my dock, coffee in hand, Baxter rolling in the sand at my feet. The sun reflected off the water, sparkling, calm, almost peaceful. But across the water, the marina glimmered in the morning light, a glaring reminder of the weeks of stress and frustration. I took a deep breath. Today would be the day I finally reclaimed my shoreline. Not with anger, not with confrontation, but with law, documentation, and a little strategic patience. I double-checked all paperwork one last time. Ownership deeds, maps, permit records, environmental assessments. Every I dotted, every T crossed. If the authorities or HOA tried to argue, I was ready. Baxter barked. I chuckled. Let's teach them a lesson, buddy. The right way. And with that, I walked down the shore, eyes fixed on the marina, mentally preparing for the confrontation that was about to unfold. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. The water lapped gently against the shoreline. Birds chirped over the waves, and Baxter was already bouncing around, tail wagging, ready for what I had dubbed Marina shutdown day. I brewed a strong cup of coffee, grabbed my notebook, legal documents, maps, and photos, and headed down to the shoreline. Today wasn't just about reclaiming property. It was about proving that private ownership and law matter, even when someone else thinks money or connections give them a free pass. Across the water, the marina sparkled in the early light, pristine docks, workers unloading equipment, jet skis bobbing gently. I took a deep breath, double-checked my documents, and reminded myself, calm, methodical, factual. This wasn't a yelling match. This was strategic action, the kind of action that makes a point without breaking the law. Baxter nudged my leg, like he was saying, go get him. I called the coastal authority first thing, providing my evidence, maps, property deeds, historical photos showing that the shoreline was privately owned, and notes detailing the construction violations. The officer on the line listened carefully, asking questions, and I could almost sense the wheels turning. Mr. Rivers, she said, you've documented this very thoroughly. We'll send an inspector immediately to review the site. That was all I needed to hear. While waiting for the inspector, I walked along the shoreline, documenting every dock, every post, every piece of heavy machinery. The workers were busy, oblivious to the fact that a storm of paperwork and law was heading their way. One of them waved casually as I passed. I waved back, smiling politely, holding Baxter's leash. Good morning, I said. Enjoy the beach while you still can. He looked confused but happy to sniff the sand. By mid-morning, the inspector arrived, clipboard in hand. I led her along my property line, pointing out exactly where the construction crossed private property. I showed her the historical photos, maps, and my documents proving ownership. She listened carefully, asked detailed questions about permits, setbacks, and environmental impact. Meanwhile, across the marina, the workers started to notice. Construction slowed. Docking machinery paused. There was a shift in energy, subtle but unmistakable. The law was on my side, and the disruption was real. Then Megan, the HOA president, arrived in her usual heels, clipboard clutched like a shield. She tried her usual charm. Alex, surely we can work this out. I smiled, calm but firm. Megan, the law has already spoken. Your construction is on private property, outside any valid permit. The inspector agrees. Let's step back and let the legal process take place. Her face shifted from smug to shocked. She realized immediately that all her assumptions about and used land were about to be corrected. The inspector took measurements, compared them with permits, and made a few calls. Meanwhile, I documented everything, taking photos, notes, and even short videos for records. Every dock post, every extension, every piece of decking that had been placed without proper authorization was noted. Baxter ran along the sand, tail wagging, occasionally barking at seagulls, providing a comedic counterpoint to the rising tension. By noon, the inspector had determined that the entire marina was in violation of private property and coastal regulations. The decision, immediate halt to construction. No exceptions, no arguments. The workers were called off the docks, equipment was secured, and the first official stop work notice was posted. I stood back, coffee in hand, feeling a surge of satisfaction. Calm, legal, precise action had achieved what weeks of polite warnings could not. The reaction from Megan and her board was instantaneous. Phones were ringing, faces flushed, whispered arguments breaking out along the docks. One of the workers muttered, "Didn't they check the deeds?" Megan spun around, trying to rally authority, but her office calls and HOA rules were powerless against the coastal permit's legal force. I walked slowly along the shoreline, pointing out every violation to the inspector while Megan's face twisted in frustration behind me. "Alex, this is outrageous," she finally shouted. I paused, smiled lightly, and said, "It's not outrageous. It's legal. It's fair. And it's necessary." Baxter barked, as if punctuating the point. Throughout the afternoon, inspectors checked every dock, every boat lift, and every structure. The stop work orders were clearly posted, legal citations documented, and the workers began dismantling certain areas while waiting for further instructions. Across the marina, the atmosphere shifted from confidence to panic and grudging acceptance. The lesson had been delivered without a single confrontation beyond clear facts and evidence. Neighbors walking along the public path peeked over fences, some taking photos, others whispering, "He actually did it. That's insane." A few children waved at me from across the shore. I waved back, smiling, realizing that the lesson extended beyond just the HOA. It was about respect, property rights, and lawfulness. By late afternoon, the marina construction was at a complete standstill. Megan finally approached, her clipboard abandoned, exasperation clear. "Alex, you didn't have to go this far." I tilted my head, calm but resolute. "Actually, I did. Weeks of ignoring property rights left me no choice. Legal, documented, and effective. That's how boundaries are enforced." She said nothing, muttering to herself as she walked away, fully aware she had been outmaneuvered not with anger, but with preparation and law. As the sun set over the water, I stood on my property, sipping a late cup of coffee, watching the marina slowly quiet down. Baxter rolled in the sand, happy, oblivious to the legal drama he had witnessed. The shoreline was mine again, fully protected, and the lesson for the neighbors was crystal clear. Private property is not negotiable, and attempting to override it comes with consequences. That evening, I documented everything again. Photos of posted stop work orders, maps, notes from the inspector, and evidence of all violations. I knew that the story would last in HOA records, neighborhood gossip, and perhaps even social media. And honestly, I didn't mind. The proof of principle was worth sharing. Meticulous preparation, knowledge of law, and calm action can achieve what yelling, complaining, or arguing never could. By nightfall, the shoreline was quiet. The luxury marina was frozen in place, workers gone or idle, the water gently lapping at the edge of my property. Baxter and I walked along the sand, surveying the calm after the storm. I reflected, this wasn't revenge. It wasn't vindictiveness. It was clarity, fairness, and enforcing boundaries. With law on your side, and maybe a little poetic justice for those who thought they could get away with taking what isn't theirs. The morning after the marina shut down, Pinecrest Heights felt unusually calm. The hum of machinery was gone. The splashing of construction hoses was replaced by the gentle lapping of waves, and the shoreline was finally quiet. I walked down my property, coffee in hand, Baxter bounding ahead, tail wagging like he understood the victory that had been won. My shoreline, private, beautiful, mine, was restored. I paused to look at the marina. The docks stood frozen mid-construction, workers packing up, machinery idle. Megan, the HOA president, and her board members were pacing nearby, muttering into their phones, frustrated, embarrassed, and trying to figure out how to salvage what little control they had. It was oddly satisfying to watch. Not cruel, just validation. After weeks of being ignored, the law had spoken, and my boundaries had been reinforced. Emails and calls started arriving within hours. Some were polite inquiries. "We need to meet and discuss what happened." Others were thinly veiled complaints. "This action seems extreme." I replied politely but firmly, "Private property. Unauthorized marina construction halted legally. No further discussion required." Every document, map, photo, and inspector's note I had compiled over the past week supported that statement. There was no room for argument. By midweek, the story had spread. Neighbors were talking, some nodding in approval, others whispering about the drama they'd witnessed. Social media posts cropped up, local bloggers ran short pieces about the marina that was stopped. The general consensus? Alex had done what was necessary, and he had done it legally, decisively, and cleverly. Even Megan, now quieter and visibly frustrated, had to admit, even if only privately, that the law had indeed sided with me. Walking along my property, I noticed subtle changes in the neighborhood dynamic. The HOA board no longer assumed access to the shoreline. Contractors and visitors hesitated before crossing my property line. Neighbors glanced at the posted signs more carefully. Respect for my private property had been reinstated, not with confrontation, yelling, or threats, but with preparation, evidence, and a rule of law. Baxter and I spent afternoons reclaiming the shoreline fully. I walked the sand, checking the tide line, measuring distances, photographing the area. Baxter rolled in the sand, chased gulls, and occasionally barked at the frozen docks, as if claiming victory. The stress of the past weeks seemed to melt away, replaced by a quiet satisfaction and a renewed sense of control over my land. Megan and the board weren't gone, of course. Whispered complaints, passive-aggressive notes, and tense phone calls still trickled in. But the lesson was already etched into everyone's minds. Private property, properly documented and legally defended, cannot be commandeered without consequences. Even the casual neighbors who had watched the drama unfold had learned that boundaries in Pinecrest Heights were to be respected. As the days passed, I reflected on the events. This wasn't just about stopping a marina. It was about asserting rights, enforcing boundaries, and demonstrating that preparation and knowledge can be more effective than confrontation or anger. Weeks of frustration, ignored requests, and casual dismissal of ownership had led to a single day of decisive action, and the results were undeniable. The shoreline, once threatened, now felt safe. I could walk along it, set up a small dock for personal use, and enjoy the view without the constant worry that someone might encroach again. Baxter and I sat on the sand one evening, watching the sunset paint the water gold, and I realized something important. Patience, strategy, and law can accomplish more than shouting or arguing ever could. I even caught some neighbors quietly joking to one another. "Don't mess with Alex's shoreline." It was subtle, yes, but it showed the lesson had been learned. Respect, it seemed, was a two-way street, and those who tried to take liberties without understanding the rules would face the consequences. Looking back, I knew the story would live on in HOA records, neighborhood gossip, and perhaps even online posts. But that was fine. It wasn't about glory or revenge. It was about clarity, fairness, and protecting what was rightfully mine. And it had worked. Strategically, legally, and memorably. Now, here's the part one want the audience to think about. What would you do if someone tried to build on your private property, ignored your warnings, and assumed their wealth or connections gave them the right to override you? Would you escalate to authorities? Gather documentation? Strategically enforce your rights? Or would you let it slide? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share your story, your strategy, or your cautionary tale. Was Alex justified? Too harsh? Or perfectly precise? Because at the end of the day, this story isn't just about a marina. It's about boundaries, property rights, and the way ordinary people can assert themselves effectively without resorting to aggression. It's a reminder that preparation, evidence, and patience often outweigh confrontation, and that law, used wisely, can protect what's yours in ways that shouting and complaining never will. So the next time someone assumes your property is fair game, remember this: plan, document, act legally, and stay calm. The results may not just protect your land. They may also teach a lesson that won't be forgotten. And if you've ever faced something similar or would react differently, I want to hear about it. Comment below. Share. Discuss. Because stories like this, about law, strategy, and standing up for what's yours, are worth talking about. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I took a last walk along the shoreline, Baxter trotting happily beside me. The marina was frozen in time, construction halted, lesson delivered. Calm, strategic, lawful, and satisfying.